our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235 47. Good private health care is affordable.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com or give a call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
WESN.
The copying my homework saga has taken a somewhat strange twist, and yet I have to go back to arguments that I made yesterday on a different situation. Of course, we all know it's election time, and we all know that, ironically, in the elections that we had last year, technically held less than a year ago, but last year nevertheless, the political affiliations did not quite look like what they look like now. Because it's very interesting how blue is all of a sudden a UNC color, but there was a more apparent explanation as to why that was so in the local government elections held last year, when the NTA was hand in hand with the UNC, when Jack Warner came out of retirement and basically said that between him, Guy Griffith, and Kamala Prasad Bisesa, they can deal with crime. And in less than a year, that message has more or less had to be, taken back, because there's a new message and a new UNC national security expert, I guess you could say, a new sheriff for the Rising Sun. But the plans that the sheriff will operate under, of course, Gary is saying, those are my plans. You're using my plans. And, well, the opposition leader is saying, well, that's a lie. I'm not using your plans. Now, I remember when I first spoke about this, the whole situation with the new ministry or splitting the Ministry of National Security. Technically, they use the same term or terms similar enough, because I remember Gary Griffith bringing it up, and I didn't necessarily think that a renaming was going to make all of a difference. The Ministry of Home Affairs. The one thing is, maybe if you do split it up, have a Ministry of Justice, but then what's the point of a Ministry of Justice when technically the DPP is independent? Or you're supposed to have a Ministry of Defense. What really do we have capacity-wise to defend ourselves from any foreign invader for a ministry to run something? And in fact, those same assets are needed with regards to our fight against crime, Coast Guard assets. So I didn't necessarily think highly of the idea, and it's one of those ideas that I don't think it's the obvious. You know, like body cameras seem somewhat obvious. Digitizing the police service so that they don't have to handwrite out and triplicate their records seems obvious. You know, updating certain laws might seem obvious. Potentially increasing the police service, that's an obvious play, right? That any administration might look to do, to add more officers on the street. This did not seem like one of those things. This seemed like a unique niche strategy. So when we essentially have two entities that come in from, to some degree, the same point of origin, but they've split off now, having the same idea, well, it does, to me, give some credence to what Guy Griffith is saying. And I do have to look at the UNC's opposition leader or political leader and say, you kind of sound a little too close to something that was already published, that was already revealed to the public. If my memory serves correct, maybe I'm misremembering things because at times witness statements are not always the most accurate thing. But the new point is Gary Griffith is basically asking for permission for emails to be released, which I assume would then be correspondence upon which these ideas were being discussed. And one would hope, for the sake of his argument, that the emails will also show that the ideas originated with him, because if they didn't really originate with him, if even it's a 50-50 split, then his whole argument sinks. But it kind of goes back to what I said with regards to the UNC and the claims about the contaminated Wassa water. Don't tell us that you have paperwork to say that your claim is true. Because in this case, you're saying that Kamala Persad-Bissessar is stealing your idea. To what degree, because you are a participant in these emails, to what degree will she still have a reasonable expectation of privacy with regards to personal emails that are dedicated to this same subject matter? I don't know. This is one of those things where it's not slander if it's true, right? But you rather cast accusations and sit on the paperwork because the person who is doing you dirty, so you claim, won't give you permission to reveal the evidence against them. Heavens forbid that people decide not to give out or allow the evidence against them to be used against them. You know? Like if you leave it up to the person who you say is lying, hey, we have emails that will help set the truth, that will give the people something to see concrete, probably, hopefully time-stamped and not meddle with any funny way, and right, to show what the truth is. I need your permission to reveal it. I'm already accusing you of basically lying indirectly because I'm saying you're stealing my stuff and then not admitting to the truth that it's my stuff. So I don't understand. I don't understand this one. Is liability laws that bad in this country? Someone please explain that to me. Now granted, obviously, I don't expect him to reveal all of his emails ever with Kamala Persad-Bissessar. But one could imagine, you know, some selected screenshots should be good enough. Now, one could argue maybe people won't believe it. They might think it's doctored. Maybe he wants Kamala Persad-Bissessar to verify the authenticity. But then, to some extent, why would she do that? Again, you're already saying that she's cheating on the exam, looking at your answers to the test and using your answers. Right? Why would she be a willing participant to potentially expose her cheating, unless maybe she's not cheating. Therein lies the rub. The situation that has been set up in front of us now, I look at it and I'm just thinking, this kind of doesn't make that much sense strategically. Like, if you just do game theory on it, why would you unfold it this way? So that, of course, it makes me wonder, to what extent is it subjective and not objective? That is to say, how things went down, and what the truth really is in this matter, at least based on what we presented. And this is where I will continue to complain about people who, at this point, I don't know if any politician in our country really qualifies to be called a politician, given the communication deficiencies that we see across the board. They're not necessarily all the same, but they're similar enough. And even the TPP was starting to fall for some of the same pitfalls that, you know, they're more established peers who carry a lot more baggage, most of it negative. They were starting to go down some of those similar patterns. Fortunately, at least in the last, I don't know what, few year or so, there was the Audiogate scandal, and that was it, for the most part. But with regards to the political campaigning here in Trinidad, I've already pointed out where, you know, well, the last thing Stuart Young should do is talk about telling the courts that what was good for the TSTT executive is good for the workers, and then be part of a cabinet that approved a salary increase for senior government officials while telling the rest of the public they wants 4%. That's technically a very hypocritical message. It's a hypocritical, but it's also unhelpful to make claims without evidence and then say you have the evidence and act as though, well, we don't know how good the evidence is because we need to review the evidence. Well, then why are you making a claim for about WASA's water supply if you haven't actually reviewed it and verified the data? Because if it was true, then you could reveal the report. If you can't reveal the report, why? It looks suspicious. It looks very weird in this case when you're saying, well, I have emails to prove it, but, you know, I need permission from the cheater in order to prove that they're cheating. Anyway, there's going to be a lot of things about Stuart Young in this one. One of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that he made the claim, it's been reported that he made the claim that they did all they could to reopen Petrotrin. I think it all comes back down to this. Did you have to close it down? That's a question that I don't know if we'll ever get a satisfactory answer to. Did you have to close it down? Even if you restructured it, you restructured other parts of Petrotrin, what about the refinery in particular? Excuse me. But let's hit a pause on the politics now. I want to get to something that was just to open with. There's much to stay here with regards to details. There's just that apparently at Golden Grove maximum security prison, there's a report at the maximum security prison at Golden Grove. Maximum security prison, that a loaded pistol was discovered amongst the prison population. I don't know. I'm not a prison officer. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I never served in the military. I never worked in the Ministry of National Security. I never worked in any paramilitary organization. I never did an internship in any office associated with any paramilitary organization. But I do think it's plainly obvious that inmates in a prison, much as a maximum security one, should not have access to loaded firearms. And I don't know about you, but that seems to be a very bad sign of something very wrong going on. But the cherry on top is the prison officers are now seeking assurances. This is a report about their safety. They're looking to their superiors. They want assurances about their safety. Who gave them the gun in the first place? If you really cared about your safety, it's a word with negative connotations. But for God's sakes, you mean to tell me that none of y'all who fear for your safety don't know nothing what's going on in that prison? Don't know who the bad apples are? Don't say you fear for your safety. Because too many of you, I won't say all, but I think it's reasonable to say too many prison officers are complicit. You might not be involved, but you turn a blind eye because you don't want the smoke. But all of a sudden, some of you say, hey, they have guns now. They might actually shoot their way out. Why do they have guns for? How did this even happen? You know, I'm hoping this report is an exaggeration or blowing smoke, but I don't think so. 9mm pistol, 7 rounds of ammunition during a lockdown left officers baffled. Advanced drone technology. So you mean to tell me that you don't have, I don't know, prison guards monitoring the walls? Because the drone has to fly over, right? Prisoners tend to not have free and unrestricted access to open air areas. You have to let them out. You have to monitor them. Like, how does the drone get to them? There seems to be a... If it's that easy, we would be hearing about this all over the world. And I don't know, I haven't heard about this all over the world. Maybe we need to start to look at El Salvador for real. Send our prison officers there for some training. Especially for the ones who were involved in this potentially, allegedly. I have a hard time saying that no prison officer was not involved with this, but we don't know for sure, right? Ironically, let's just say all the prison officers are clean. What is the implication of that statement? That the entire system is that inept. It's fine. It's fine. Just remember, the grand plan, at least at some point, of the national security apparatus in this country was to go after FUL holders. But not only can they not get the automatic rifles off the street, but now they can't keep pistols out of the hands of inmates in the maximum security prison. That said, it's not all bad. There was a police interdiction of apparently they arrested 4 suspects, although the report technically at one point says that they arrested 3. I'm not too sure where the 4th person was arrested. If he was arrested when they intercepted the vehicle, there was a home invasion in Real Spring, Valsayn. The residents called the police. The police responded in a timely manner. They were able to intercept the vehicle and cause the perpetrators, the alleged perpetrators, to flee on foot. Then an extensive manhunt apparently was done with multiple officers from various divisions: North Central Division Task Force West, North Central Division Task Force East, St. Joseph CID, Puna CID, Piarca CID, Traffic and Highway Patrol Branch, amongst others. Well, because at least in this, they know, okay, we have some guys here. And they found at least 3 suspects. I'm not too sure again where the 4th suspect was found. Kudos to the police for this one. You have to give praise where it's due, and this was a timely response. Yes, the cynics could have certain speculations about the situation. I'm not going to go there, at least not without some reason to do so. I'll just give the TTPS their kudos and say thank you to the boys in gray, blue, for responding in such a timely manner, not just apprehending the alleged perpetrators, but responding so quickly as to disrupt their escape plans and give us the ability to hold them to account. All right, let's go straight into the daily review. All right, a lot to get through, not enough time. Let's go to what I believe is the top story. The government is saying we have $5 million for the victims' families. $1 million of the Paria tragedy, or in one case the victim. $1 million per family/victim. And the attorneys are basically pointing out to the fact that it took a general election for the government to tap into its conscience. This is from Anand Ramlogan. I believe he represents 2 of the victims, including the survivor, Christopher Boudram, looking for justice for the last 3 years. And he's saying that, no, we want a $5 million ex gratia payment. Nothing less will suffice. This is a quote in the report. And we refuse to allow our clients to be used as political pawns in this political charade. Timing of the election, right? This is one of those things where, like, to some extent, I can't fault the PNM for some of it, like the opening of the airport and the hospital and that stuff, right? Because, unfortunately, the society has trained the politicians that they have to do it this way in order to maximize the benefit for re-election. However, this situation, I warned the government that they essentially have themselves only to blame when the family of the deceased are campaigning for the UNC. And the survivor is campaigning for the UNC. One of the family members of the deceased is a member of the UNC, a councillor, I believe, right? And they could say all the political stuff they want about their situation. I didn't live it, and to some extent, I look at the whole situation and I'm left to wonder, well, why hasn't the government responded in a more timely manner? Outside of the Commission of Inquiry, the government's response to this has been relatively poor. Sorry, that is not entirely true. Technically, Cabinet did respond because the board of Paria didn't know what they were doing. So after all the bad press the first night, Stuart Young had to come and save the board, because how dare we expect political appointees to actually be able to do anything worth anything? Maybe that's why people are so fed up with political appointees. So again, this whole situation, the government did the best it could to meet its political obligations that was, we could speculate, to be completely self-serving, because it made themselves maybe not look as bad as they possibly could, but bad enough. And there's almost no way of fixing it. The other attorney for the other 3 victims' families is Prakash Ramada, political leader for the COP. He has a similar sentiment. There's no equality, there's no fairness, and suddenly, in light of an election, you come with this. TNT elections have consequences. This is one of them. We are not to be easily fooled. But at the same time, we are happy in the last few days the government has seen the light. Now, maybe he's more agreeable to the amount, at least the victims are getting something. And to be fair, I also am very happy to see the victims are getting something. It's just that Prime Minister Young, there's a report that basically is saying there's no politics involved in this, and the insurance companies didn't want to pay out, and Paria and LMCS, their lawyers are willing to fight to the bitter end, so the government had to step in finally to decide to make payment without admitting liability. And all of that is to basically repeat a similar criticism over other issues and campaign promises that I have said before. You were part of the government that oversaw this entire matter from the beginning. Why did it take, 3 years? All right, it took a year. All right, you waited until the Commission of Inquiry. Maybe you waited a year after the Commission of Inquiry. Why did it take this long? Well, sorry, I'm losing track of the timeline. February 2022. Can't remember when the Commission of Inquiry came out, but regardless, we have ironically, the same sentiment that is one of the few defenses for the bullying accusations against Stuart Young. The timing is very convenient, right? I'll tell you this, Prime Minister, given the fact that that's one of the few things that we could put forward in your defense, you are probably the last person who could thus subsequently say, well, don't look at how convenient the timing is. Look at our intent. Our intention is pure. All right then, so am I supposed to assume that the people that accused you of being the instigator of a bullying incident that was so bad that it potentially, I know the priest said that there was no expulsion and no punishment, but it potentially negatively affected a student in a somewhat permanent manner? Let's put it that way. Because we should judge him by his intent, right? Not by his timing. Let's judge it by what the accuser intended, that you are a bully. Now, it's not something that I easily want to believe because the timing is too convenient, because they had years to come out and say this when you were a high-end minister. Obviously, you weren't a backbencher. It's the same thing. You could have done this months ago, maybe a year or two ago, but you did it now. You did it now after multiple times the victims' families have lambasted the government's lack of response, lack of any sort of political backbone to be decisive as opposed to a wait and see. Listen, I don't want to believe that this is a political puppy show. It's just that if I try to say that it's not a political puppy show, just about everybody who is not a diehard PNM that could hear the sound of my voice would ridicule me off this set. It would be completely unreasonable to say otherwise. In part because I use that to defend you against the bullying accusations. Not completely, but. So this is, unfortunately, an example of an unnecessarily ridiculous political situation. Because what changed between last week and now, between last month and now, between last year and now, with regards to the legalities of the situation and the legal obligations? What changed? Except for the requirements to campaign. I want to get to one last point here before we take the break. So, now to be a little bit less critical of Stuart Young. Stuart Young has apparently, well, he came out on the political platform to say that the UNC is looking to devalue the TT dollar. And he pointed to a section of let me get it right, the UNC's National Economic Transformation Master Plan from 2020 to 2025. Now, to some extent, it's technically outdated. But he quoted a section that says the Minister of Finance will work with the central bank to ensure the exchange rate is competitive, eliminating the currently dirty managed float and allowing market forces to operate. And the opposition is basically saying, no, that interpretation is wrong. My issue is the interpretation to some extent is reasonable. But then on top of that, we ourselves have had similar questions. How is the opposition going to pay for all the things that they're promising when they're also going to, one, cut taxes, and they have also decried the amount of loans that the government, the amount of debt the government has. So the implication is they're not going to take on any more debt. At least the level of debt will remain constant. Maybe as they pay off, they'll have to get new debt. I don't know. But they complain about the level of debt. They want to reduce taxes. Where the money coming from to give the PSA workers, amongst others, 10%, and to pay for all the things that apparently they are implying that they're going to do. And maybe one of the ways, depending, I don't have time to go into the details, is you allow the exchange rate to succumb to market forces. But then that makes imports more expensive, right? So I don't know exactly how that would help. And maybe, I mean, an economist could tell me, I don't have the time to go through, I haven't gone through the exercise to try and figure it out or to do the research. But I'll just say this, though. you left enough room for the PNM to hit you with that criticism. So now we have to wait and see. Apparently the opposition has directly said that they're not going to mess with the exchange rate. So like I said, that economic plan, it's 2020 to 2025. That means it was probably written about 5 years or more ago. But given the fact that the UNC is making promises economically that doesn't necessarily seem to add up, the room of doubt now has allowed the PNM an angle with which they could hit you back with. Again, I don't understand. Does nobody look at their political messaging and formulate an overall plan that would be hopefully consistent? Like, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome our guests. There's a lot of the actual politicking stuff to get into, and we'll talk about that and more after this. Stay tuned.
My name is Dr. Joanne Williams-Carroll, and I am the Director of Behavioral and Mental Health at the Community Hospital. At the Community Hospital, we believe in nurturing mind, body, and soul. Through our counseling and chaplaincy program, we will provide you with support and strength you need to help with your mental and emotional well-being.
Give us a call.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Between the Bank and the Gutter, a novel about street dwellers in Port of Spain. This is a book to make you both laugh and cry. Above all, it takes you to that special space that only street dwellers know. In this moving and riveting human interest story, Harry journeys from insanity to sanity while living on the streets of Port of Spain. Now available at Metropolitan Books, 12 Aripita Avenue, Woodbrook. Paper-based bookshop, 14 Alcazar Street, Woodbrook. WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. And the home store branches located at Barataria, Shogunas, and East Gates Mall. Autographed copies now available on request. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh. I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People, and Closer to the Church.
And we're back here on Talk About a WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small, joined by Dr. Shea Mohammed. I guess you could say at this point, he's like our Adam Schefter of politics for those that watch ESPN. He's our WESN political insider, Dr. Shea Mohammed. Yes, we pile it on the expectations now. You better come good today, right? You better come good today.
Listen, again, blues are ready for online for my perspectives on certain things.
Yeah, but online, while it does include many, many upstanding citizens of TNT with well-intentioned arguments, it also contains some of the lowest cesspools of our political discourse, right?
Well,
and I'll just say it.
Listen, you see, I don't like to have to go through the idea of doing political lectures and that sort of thing online because people don't understand. I have to read and spell for people. And I don't want to have to do that because of the specifics. But when I say that Julian John has broken ground given the 25-year history of her presence in the UNC and how she was handpicked by Mr. Pandey back in the 2000s, and why she was handpicked and what was his vision when he chose her, and now she is the person that's she's going into electoral politics once again, and she's fighting the seat that Mr. Pandey held for almost 40 years. People can't understand why is that groundbreaking. They're telling me, well, look at Stuart Young in Port of Spain and Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West. They're telling me, look at Jarrett Narayan in Aruka North. But they're not understanding the dynamic and the demographic in those areas are not groundbreaking because of the history behind the two constituencies. But hey.
I think also people need to understand, like, if we want to just say, well, she's one of those crooked politicians, you could potentially put that generalized label on everybody, right? No, because I do believe when I try to say, but this person isn't that bad or that person is not bad, they say they're all corrupt. It's like, yeah, but then if we're going to just do that broad strokes situation, unless you have evidence of something specific, it's kind of hard for me to roll with an excessively negative opinion for a politician, because academically it's not useful, right? I understand that, yes, they may be part of an overall entity. Look, there's a lot of questions with regards to some of the decisions that came out of the current administration. But to say that we're going to now have detailed specifics to level that a lot of the people involved in cabinet, that's, if we ever get there, then we'll have those conversations then. I think it's similar. There'll be people who want to just label Julian John a certain way. And to some extent, if you just be neutral about it, like, look, we could speculate about a lot of bad things about everybody across the board, but what's the point of that? So, well, and like you said, there's something about when somebody breaks even a minor demographic barrier.
Correct.
Right? Because we are hoping that it becomes so frequent to the point where it's old news. It's not old news yet.
Yeah, I agree. Like, who would have thought, though? Who would have thought that we would have seen the day where a black woman from Tobago is holding one of the safest seats in the opposition, but more so the seat that was held by her former boss, who's a legend in itself, Mr. Pandey. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not something that you would have questioned that 5-10 years ago. It's a reality today. You telling me about Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West with Stuart Young. Do political history, do race and class history, and it will tell you that Port of Spain and North St. Anne's West is aligned to a very colonial word called bourgeoisie. Come on, let me be real.
I think there's also there's another angle to Julian John getting Basil Pandey's former seat. Yes. I don't necessarily want to get to, but there's another angle there, right? There's questions about, what did happen with that seat.
I'm not afraid to go there, but let's go there. And the truth about it is, yes, I agree with that as well. There's a need for, there are certain seats that one has to consider that it's legendary, because there are people who founded our political fabric that sat in those seats for years and sat in the Red House and made absolutely tremendous, meaningful contributions to our political history that's gone on to become the people that we study, not just nationally or domestically here in Trinidad and Tobago, but they form part of our regional and our international political history. And the truth is, I agree with you. Let's say it out loud. Ravi Retiram was a horrendous choice for Couva North. He was one of the poorest choices we could have chosen because of he didn't come clean and didn't come, come on, let me start.
Ironically, I don't disagree with you, at least to some extent. But that wasn't where I was going. That wasn't where I was going, right? Although where I was going wasn't all bad, because let's just say you don't necessarily want to set up dynasties, right? I'm thinking about the long term, about what didn't happen, right? And I'll leave that there. I'll just leave that there. Okay.
Listen, we could have set up dynasties. I think nothing is wrong with setting up dynasties. I mean,
When done in good faith?
in the Indian subcontinent, dynasties do exist. In the United States, dynasties did exist. In Canada, we just came out of a dynasty in Canada. It's not a bad thing if the person that is the successor in the dynasty is putting in the hard work and the meaningful, in-depth work that is going to be groundbreaking. And I can't say the same in the instance of Trinidad and Tobago. I could say that in terms of Brian Manning. I could say that in terms of him going and creating a dynasty, succession of a dynasty there. But he understood the political dynamic of where he is, what he is, the party that he belongs to, the dynamics that would have, came out of the history of his father's legacy, how, the what, the when, the why, the who, and he's doing what he needs to do. I don't think Brian Manning has aspirations to be prime minister, and if he does, maybe in 15 years, maybe 10 years, who knows? But that's left to be seen. The point is, he's playing a very strategic political game, and that's to be admired.
I think the jury should be, we have to wait and see more. For people who want to kind of toss him aside, it might be a bit premature, right? But with that said, of course, we had the PNM slate essentially was announced the 2 days before the election was called, right? It was the Sunday, then we had the swearing in of what I will call, at least, I will consider an interim caretaker cabinet.
Government, yeah,
right?
I dare with you.
And I mean, it's 5 weeks of a cabinet before the election. What else am I supposed to call it? And then the election was called on the Tuesday, I believe, the Tuesday morning. Now we have a bigger picture or a better picture grasp of who the UNC slate are. First of all, I just want to double check with you because I'm not entirely sure. They haven't announced everybody, have they? But it seems as though they've announced like a good chunk of their slate, which is not what I was expecting.
The UNC?
The UNC, yes.
Yeah, that's a done deal there, my friend.
So it's done. They've named all 41?
Yeah, nobody. It's all 39. They're not doing Tobago.
All right, yes. Sorry, my mistake. Now, with that said, you called for, basically, I'll use the word, you didn't use this word, but I'll use the word. You called for upgrades, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen some of the changes. And we've even got rumors that maybe some of the changes might be last minute and it didn't go through the screening process, but we'll set that aside for now. What do you make of some of the changes? Because I would say this, they did, seemingly at least, maybe as to the same extent of the PNM changed, and there's at least one other example, you named one, there was at least one other example where they got rid of some more of the dead weight of their last slate, right? Do you think that the UNC has improved this position overall?
Yeah, I would call it winnable.
That's it? That's all I got?
Yeah, that's winnable.
Okay.
It's winnable.
I mean, I understand that word, that statement has a lot of weight.
St. Joseph, I could tell you, yes, St. Joseph, fantastic. Toko Sandy Grande, fantastic. Lupino Aruca, fantastic. Where we again? Go down. I don't know the candidate for, I've never met, so I'm not familiar. She's brand new, the candidate for Kumuto Manzanilla. Okay. La Hoqueta Telparo, very good strategy. San Fernando West, excellent candidate. Couva North, excellent candidate. Princestown, new, but Princestown seems to be okay with there. Tabaquite, good candidate. Where else?
What about, I think it's Tunapuna.
I had an interview the other day about Tunapuna. That has potential to be very good. It's one of the hardest constituency to swing. He has to speak the language of the constituents. He must be relatable to the constituents. He must be seen as a hardliner in terms of fighting crime, but he has to come across as very compassionate and empathetic. And if Roger Alexander could balance that and be true to the commitment to the people, he has a possibility of winning it, but it's not on my top 5 list.
I'll say this: I haven't seen everything that you know, all of his public appearances in detail, but just based on what I have seen, he doesn't seem to be like one of those rah 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 ultra aggressive, right? When he approaches the podium, it's a reasonable tone, you know.
Yeah.
But my one concern is we saw what happened with Reginald Lamour as Attorney General, and I think it's safe to say you will probably never see such an accomplished individual look so inept due to his lack of political experience that to cause what I would argue to be a complete and an abject failure of filling or trying to fill that office with someone better than who was there before. And I that's my one fear. Roger Alexander is not a career politician. Yes, you could deal with office politics and political interference all you want, but then of course being a politician and now having to communicate to the public, I mean, he's done it, to be fair, in his capacity on his show, and he's been willing to stand his ground and even push back against his superiors on certain things, and that's essentially, I believe, why they pulled the plug on him being on the show. It is what you know, that was what it was. But the lack of political experience, that's my main concern, right? Let's just say they win, right? And we'll get to the overall tone of the campaigning. And then he's now having to be MP and a minister. You know, one of the problems, I actually think, when you have former security people being in the post of the civilian leadership of the security post is you're not really civilian leadership. You're just an extension of the military mindset. And the minister or the secretary of defense is supposed to be the counterbalance to the generals or whoever, right, that runs the show from the military or paramilitary side. And I do think that usually when we get someone like past ministers of national security, we don't get that. We don't get that balance. We don't get that perspective, that representative of the people with regards to those issues directly. So those are my... They're a bit procedural, I guess you could say, with regards to his character and his personality. This is one of those situations, and I've said it before, I gave Keith Rowley this, opportunity, yes, but when he became Prime Minister, I wasn't going to prejudge him as Prime Minister. I didn't prejudge Kalma Pasabi as a Prime Minister. Now, I think we should extend Roger Alexander to some degree. Let's not prejudge him as a politician. Let's actually see, you know, a little bit of how he operates before we start to formulate an opinion. With regards to the Commissioner of Police and Royal Commission of Police, when anybody said I jumped the gun on that because I was accused of that, I saw enough to know that I was going to be bad, right? I saw enough, but I haven't seen enough from Roger Alexander to say that he's going to be bad. But with that said, I noticed something last week that I found interesting. It seemed as though the UNC was dominating the airways in terms of the number of channels carrying their rallies, as well as...
That includes your station as well.
Listen.
And listen, I've already checked to see who is carrying their rally tomorrow in Center of Excellence. And yes, your company's logo is listed as well. So y'all got all booked out already.
Hold on, okay. We were open for whoever wanted to book us. That's as far as I'm aware, right? The fact that
y'all are part of the oligarchy that got booked out since December or November, and
I don't think I don't know, but I don't think we were not part of whatever the pre-existing things were. I know that the commercial side was open for commercial business. And I know editorially our management would love to be able to show both sides and try to offer a balanced view, but we could only work with the people.
I don't see y'all carrying the PNM rally this evening in Exodus Panyard. What is wrong with y'all?
Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me? I can't listen. Why you don't go and ask a police officer what the commissioner did wrong all the time, right? You just go find some random police officer on the street or some random PNM administrative worker or some random UNC administrator. Go deal with other people's subordinates and ask them about their boss, right? Go, right? Why you? Anyway, like I said, WSN, is more than willing to work with any and all political parties. I'll just say that up front. I'll just say that up front with regards to our broadcasting, right? And with regards to interviews. We do want to offer a balanced perspective. But with that said, my point was, I don't know if we were showing rallies at that time, because but outside the Tobago stuff,
Yeah.
the UNC seemingly were very aggressive, and their rallies had a certain size and energy that at the time I could not see anything that was equivalent on the PNM side.
That's true.
The St. Joseph, the stark contrast with the rallies in St. Joseph. Now, recently there was one, I believe, in San Fernando that the PNM conducted last night. Yes. That was, whoo, that was big. That had impact and power. But last week...
Did you think so, really?
Well, yeah. It had...
Really?
Just on the surface, not regards with who spoke and what they said, but just looking at the crowd response. Because if you're, listen, compared to what I saw last week, I didn't see much of a crowd response last week. It was almost like if the MC had to try and like, how to say, negotiate with the audience.
You mean the Woodford Square versus the San Fernando Promenade meeting?
Oh no, I'm thinking about a smaller rally that was nationally televised, juxtaposed with the UNC St. Joseph meeting. I think they had a similar one, but the PNM did it in like a community center. It was a lot smaller. There was a lot less energy. The crowd was a lot less into it. You know, you could tell that the speakers were trying.
The Prime Minister wants to do a do-over of Tunapuna because about a week or two ago, he did a walkabout in Tunapuna, and he was a power walk he did, and yes, he had a lot of music trucks and a lot of excitement. I give them that. Their vibes, the ground carrier music is very vibesy, so they still kind of carrying the campaign off of the carnival spirit. But when I saw the number of persons that went into the Exodus Spaniard, it literally filled the Exodus Spaniard that it was not overflowing. So it didn't happen in the way that they expected it. And then down the road, down in the corner of Page and Tunapuna Main Road, where the UNC went in a car park, it was overflowing with people, which for me, I was like, whoa, this is interesting.
Yes.
Now, last night in Shogunas, that, if you know Centerpoint Mall Auditorium, it is humongous. They have concerts in there for Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. I mean, Sean, the number of seats that you put in and you pack in Centerpoint Mall Auditorium is a real huge capacity. And it was ram out. There was no place for people to sit. People were standing. One of my friends who went, he said...
Dr. Mohammed? Well, let me just, while it seems that Dr. Mohammed's connection is... we've got you back. You were saying about last night.
Yeah, so the thing about it is one of my friends was saying to me last night that he went to the meeting and I was asking him about who's there and what was the vibe. And he said, listen, I can't tell you who was there. I can't tell you what I could tell you it was ram out. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of vibe. He said, Centerpoint Mall Auditorium is really big. It's really big. And he said there was a lot, there was standing space. I was like, well, that's showing. I mean, obviously, we still go by the fact that crowds don't win elections.
Yes,
but
it's a very imperfect indicator.
It's the worst indicator, but what it does, it gives you an indication of the vibe, and it gives you an indication of the interest, and it gives you an indication of the amount, what people are starting to think. So, for example, which meeting? The one in San Fernando, the one that they had in San Fernando in Naparima College Auditorium. The auditorium could hold a maximum of 2,500 people. They put 3,000 people in the auditorium. And outside the auditorium, there was an average of 4,000 or 5,000 people outside that you could even get up. That area towards the hospital, when you come down Sutton Street, and you had to park on Sutton Street to be able to walk up the hill to go to Naparima College. Now, that is also a very huge meeting. So, are they attracting a large number of persons that are actually going to their meetings to hear and be part of their thing? By all means, yes. But what is also very important to note is that I was following their YouTube channel and I was looking at the numbers to see how many people were on their YouTube watching YouTube, and it was 9,000 people watching YouTube at its peak.
Right.
Like what?
So I mean, right, we've already established before that it seems as though it might not be an indicator of voters and supporters, but at the very least it's an indicator people are willing
interest
to watch, to hear what they have to say. Now, the point that I wanted to make, since last week, like Thursday, Friday, when I'm watching these rallies, right? Because my household is trying to watch everything. They want to watch everything. But it seemed as though, with regards to Trinidad, right? I can't necessarily, I don't know what's going on with Tobago with regards to the PNM, so I don't want to make a comparison.
Oh, I can tell you what's going on there.
Hold on. Wait. But with regards to Trinidad, it seems as though the UNC, the people that didn't call the election, that may not have necessarily been totally prepared for the election, somehow still managed to, at least for a week, outflank the PNM with regards to airtime and getting their campaign meetings on air, and then holding, relatively impressive looking campaign meetings, which again, perception is part of it, right? If it looks as though you're popular, people are going to potentially, some people are going to be bandwagonists at the end of the day, or they're going to say, well, what's the point of me voting? Obviously, the UNC going to win, the PNM going to lose. So if I'm a PNM supporter, I'm not a diehard, I might say, why bother? I'm in a UNC stronghold, why bother? I'm in a marginal seat, but it seems like the UNC more popular in my area, why bother voting? Which I would lament that's not the right mindset to have. Whoever should win because they have more support, not because the supporters on the other side just decided not to turn up that day. But we'll transition to this week after. Just last week, am I right to say that it kind of seemed as though somehow the UNC was better prepared? Because there was that report where the PNM was complaining about airtime, and I kind of felt, didn't you call the election and you weren't prepared with airtime and you want to kind of retroactively complain? That doesn't make sense to me. So am I right to wonder, did the UNC manage to kind of pull a fast one on the PNM there, at least for a week?
Yes, they did, and they actually, so we live. What I could say is this, right? I think we are moving away out of a period where the hate of the leaders for each other, or the disdain of the leaders for each other, we're shifting away from that. And as a result of that, the followers are going to shift away from that outright hate for each other. Because I grew up in a political world where political leaders did not hate each other. They saw each other as political opponents, but really and truly, in the privacy of the tea room, across the floor of the parliament, there was camaraderie, there was rhetoric, there was picong, there was laughter, there was a certain level of, it was decent. And there would have been the times when the PNM would call the UNC and say, oh, God, boy, or you ease us up a little bit, give us a little space. That kind of language, right? But you're right. In 2025, the UNC did have a one-up on the PNM when, from November, they booked spaces on airtime for radio and TV, and they kind of made it their priority to ensure that this time around that they got the airplay that they needed, even if it was not live for all of their meetings. It was delayed broadcast. It was but it's on the air. The one difference is that TTT is state-based, and therefore TTT will be obliged to for now to do as the PNM wants. Now, it's just how it is. But yes, you're right. The PNM, the UNC, did trump the PNM, and they did, take dominance of the airwaves. That was something that the UNC boasted about, that they had the control of the airwaves and whatnot. But, going forward, though, Sean, I'm looking forward to a period when we could go back to civility of politics, and we could go back to a space where we can disagree, but we can agree to disagree, and we can go off and laugh about it after that. I remember back in my heyday when I was doing campaigns in 2007 in Princestown, that we were once stuck in a motorcade between the PNM and the UNC, and the truck that I was on was very much parallel to the PNM truck, and they were literally saying, "Hey, we need some ice. Or you have ice there, what?" And you hand the ice over a bucket, a bowl of ice across the road to them. Yes, they say, "Well, they have there. They have pillar or roti." And you're sharing food because that's the camaraderie that we were able to develop as a people. And I look forward to the day when that can happen again.
I mean, you say you look forward, but I don't see indicators of that happening anytime soon, just based on the rhetoric being used and the willingness now, because like I said this, there was the claims of, was it Barry Pararath? Oh, there's contaminated water in Wassa. We have the report, we're reviewing the report. The minister should review the report. I'm like, if you have a report, review the report. Don't just throw a claim like that out there. It's similar to the bullying claim. It's like, look, I don't have you're telling me there's evidence exists but not revealing it doesn't help me. I need and the willingness now to kind of try to level the worst accusations at each other, or to say outright horrible things, because the hot mic incident did happen. One of my callers claims that stuff happens all the time in Parliament, you know, both ways. And I'm just thinking the civility might be gone, and we might need like a generational turnover just to kind of get that out of the system, because I don't really see it easing up. Now, I'll say this, or at least on the surface, I do think sometimes the PNM try to comport themselves as respectful, but we've seen that, you know, who knows what happens behind the scenes, right? Given what was revealed. And not all of the UNC engage in that, right? And I appreciate those who don't, right? Yeah. Of course, there are some members of PNM who also engage in it, let's be frank. But, yeah. But to some extent, the diehard stance of we will never agree, it seems to be like an unspoken part of the now cartel in politics.
I love the word cartel.
Right? Because, again, if I lose, I'm opposition, I still collect a check, I still collect a pension or whatever. Well, I guess I was a minister, prime minister, so those of us who had those positions, our pension already high up there, right? I'm in opposition, I still collect a check, I still get to go to the Red House, I still get to be someone important, and we could just swap. Right? And maybe Kamala saying it's her turn now, and maybe Stuart ready to leave, and like, maybe I need a term in opposition. Let the UNC deal with the next 5 years and that headache. We already dealt with the last 10 years and that headache. Let them face the frying pan, and we could take some easy layups criticizing them. Like, I don't know. That's what it feels like, because the population seems to be fine playing tennis with our political leadership, right? Whoever serves it up to who. And then now it seems like the unspoken rule is we don't even need to be civil to each other anymore publicly. We could attack each other. You know, once we just don't commit slander or do anything illegal, let's have at it, right? It doesn't matter. And they seem fine with it. And I don't see anyone really trying to say, I am going to be the example by which I hope everyone else follows, to put an end to that and essentially mirror what you're saying. I could be wrong, but I haven't heard it.
No, yeah, agreed. Yeah, I'm not living in a utopian world, and I do agree with you that the reality is that there needs to be a change in the dialogue. There are several new people. I mean, when you look at the list from the UNC, there are several new people here, right? Not everybody is going to make the cut in at the end of the day on election night. When we're talking about that, but the fact of the matter is, if I look down at this list and I go through the possibilities of what the outcome would look like, there would be a few persons that are, and a good bit, I would say, of persons that are brand new to the parliament and to the political arena, and therefore they have the opportunity to change the dynamic and to use political wisdom and maturity, or to gain political wisdom and maturity, at least in the first year of sitting in the parliament, maybe 6 months, who knows. It depends on what people's what their cohesiveness is, how well they could adjust and understand the atmosphere and the environment that they're in. But we do need to change the dynamic. Now, you're very right when the PNM could very well be saying, and even not in, I don't even think in the case of Stuart Young is saying it, but the PNM itself could be saying, you know what, this is a hard world. We'll have to figure out, we got to figure out how we're going to navigate. Maybe the money bad, maybe the economics is not matching up to our political ambitions. So let's sit this one out. Then there's the other aspect of it. There seems to be a very anti-PNM sentiment that is also matched with an anti-UNC sentiment. And it is almost as if it's going head to head with each other. Within the last couple of weeks, the UNC seems to be a little bit edging, that it's working, that they could possibly, and I use the word possibly very cautiously, possibly get across a finish line with a possible majority. But that's possible because we are still, how many days outside of, 24 days away from an election. But you're very right in that there are some instances where people who won by large majorities in the PNM in 2020 are facing some possibilities of whether that majority can be closed and whether that majority, they could even lose that majority. So there's that dynamic that's playing out on the ground, and I don't know if how in the days to come, because today's nomination day. So after all the paperwork is settled today and everybody officially becomes candidates and goes from nominees to candidates or prospective candidates to candidates, is really when the real tempo starts out there. Now we're talking about a Trinidad context. However, in the Tobago context, I saw something the other day that I was really, really proud of. And I saw the candidates for Tobago West are former schoolmates. They went to school together. And Joel Samson was campaigning in the area and the vicinity of Shamfa Kojo's grandmom. And he was going to meet her grandmom and his contingent of campaigners were going to meet her in her yard. And Shamfa was passing, and the video is a very, very well done video. And Shamfa come out and she's like, Nazi, what you doing in my grandmother's yard? And they hug up and they talk about, this love go way back, and, at the end of the day is one love. You see that gives me a sense of pride, because that is the politics that I grew up to, that we could differ, we could choose to sit on either sides of a political aisle, but at the end of the day, we grew up in the same school. For example, I went to school with Anisha Beach, and I'm very proud to see Anisha Beach on a PNM platform, emceeing the PNM programs, seeing her co-hosting on TV and whatnot, because I literally was at least at one form ahead of Anisha Beach. Anisha Beach is a proud student of my alma mater, St. Stephen's College. So I'm really happy to see Anisha Beach out there doing. I went to school with the PNM candidate for Princestown, Rocklin Mohammed. He was a few years ahead of me. Very good people. And not because they belong to the PNM means that we are squared enemy. Of course not. And if it happens that on election day, that when I go to vote, I end up seeing Rocklin Mohammed on the road or in the vicinity of a polling station, of course I go hug up him and talk to him and say what's going on. If I go to observe a PNM meeting and I see Anisha Beach, I will hug her and talk to her and laugh with her. I mean, it's obvious I have friends in both the PNM, the UNC, I have some friends in the Patriotic Front, I have friends in the NT, as you know, I have friends in Tobago. Why are we, that's the kind of camaraderie we want. I don't necessarily have to agree with the politics or the policies, but it doesn't mean that we have to be square enemies. And I think that I would like to see restored in the next Republican Parliament.
So believe it or not, the aftermath of the THA election, I think we saw a bit of that, just a bit. First of all, Tracy Davidson Celestine, she comported herself well with her concession speech. There was no controversy there. There was no kick-up or fight or whatever. And then the PNM, Dr. Faith Brebner, she told us on more than one occasion, the communication has been good with central government. I think what happens though is the willingness to communicate at least starts. The problem is I have an agenda, you have an agenda, and you know, for some reason we can't get to the stage of compromising now when it comes to making decisions that will actually affect budgets and policy, at least not yet. Right? So it's possible. I have to agree with you. I do think it's possible. Right? I remember I showed a video a while back. I think it was Senator, oh gosh, who's the head of the...
Sagram Singh Suklal?
No. Who's the head for the UNC in the Senate? Wade Mark. It was Senator Wade Mark. And I can't remember which PNM MP or senator that they kind of met on the street and kind of had a hug and a what have you.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember showing that and saying, this is what we need. And that was like maybe 2 to 3 years ago. So it can happen. But I think now then when you get to policy decisions, all of a sudden things break down because for whatever reason, ironically, despite the fact that they make a lot of similar decisions when you get down to the details of it, right? It's just, they'll disagree not because they disagree with the principle, but they disagree because you present it, so I have to disagree. And therein lies the rub. Like, to some extent, if either side was in power at a certain time, a lot of decisions would be probably very similar with regards to certain things. So why is it so hard for them to now come together and agree on certain things and potentially find a compromise to allow certain things so we could actually pass bills that have a little bit more punch in them with a special majority rather than a,
former Prime Minister Rowley, when he did his final interview with the media in Whitehall, and they asked him about if there was any moment when it was really good between him and Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, and he talked about the Nelson Mandela funeral.
Yes.
And when he had to pretend, when they suggested and they hatched a plan where he pretended to be her husband to get into the funeral. Now, those things are good and those things would make you smile, but in the aftermath, I mean, obviously people make errors. Politicians make terrible blunders. Sometimes they have a lapse in judgment. They have poor judgment in sometimes their choices of candidates. I mean, who hasn't done that, right? A friend of mine told me last night, he said, oh, you're supporting Donald Trump. I said, but I never did not support Donald Trump. I took a very neutral position on the election, in the US election. I also am monitoring what is happening in St. Vincent, in Guyana, in Jamaica, and in Canada. Canada being the most interesting one right now because it happens to be on the same day with us, and that their geopolitics and their geoeconomics is actually very, very interesting. But I have a middle ground when it comes to international politics because I'm not taking a side. Like, so when he said to me, last night we were having this conversation, I said, I'm actually very much in support of the Donald Trump policy on education. And he's like, oh, you're supporting Donald Trump? No, I was like, no. When something is good,
yes,
it's very good. And when something is bad, it's very bad. And I mean, I could safely say to you that in the greater scheme of things, Donald Trump has taken elitism out of, or he's working towards taking elitism out of education to allow for Americans and the wider world to access education in the United States in a more affordable manner, because the truth is Ivy League universities were digging out people's eyes and putting them in debt for years, and then the government would have to run in to help take them out of this debt. And that's not what the role of education is. Education is about giving people the opportunity to advance themselves and to go down a route of prosperity and productivity. So yes, I totally agree that what President Trump is doing for education in the United States is not just critical to the United States, but it's critical to the globe and how people access education in the United States. I know for sure what he's done is he's broken it down in a way where you don't necessarily, and I agree with this, in the age of technology, you don't have to be on American ground to go to an American university. The same way you don't need to be in a British, to be in the British land, in the land of the British to be able to go to
I
a
mean,
British university.
so technically,
those are good things.
technically, even long before the age of online courses like what we have now, Reutech offered a degree in partnership
Yes.
in conjunction with University of New
Which
Brunswick,
have New Brunswick. I agree with
who
you on that.
managed the program, right?
Yes.
And then my degree technically doesn't say Reutech, it says University of New Brunswick, right?
Yes,
My first
yes.
degree. So with that said, though, good policy is good policy, whoever says it. Now, we've seen some of the policy proposals coming out of both sides. A lot of criticisms from the PNM side is, but you were in power for the last 10 years. Why are you waiting until now to promise some of these things? So that frustrates me to no end. But what also frustrates me is the UNC seemingly wants to pretend it's 2010 again and they're going to have the budget between 2010 and 2015 because they keep talking about what they did during that time with a different budget. If you speak to anybody in the oil and gas sector and you're looking at the gas revenues and the taxes and whatever, like the drop, it's kind of hard to say, oh no, we have the same. The budget looks the same. I don't think, in part due to inflation, we have the same amount of actual purchasing power that we did, 10 years ago.
And on top of that, too, Sean, I will say this. The budgets of 2010 to 2015 would have been more valuable than the budgets of 2015 to 2025. And therefore, we have to take into consideration what the value of the dollar in 2010 to 2015 meant compared to the value of the dollar in 2015 to 2025.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, when I did my PhD thesis, one of the things I looked at was revenue generation in comparison to the years before. And the truth is, in our entire history, or post-independence history, 2010 to 2015 was one of the highest, one of the pivotal parts of our economic history, and it is one of those periods when we received the highest revenue for the price of oil ever. Right? Let's take into consideration that we live in a world where we can't even compare ourselves to being an oil producer, because I mean, really and truly, look at what we did with the refinery, right? My concern is this: I have continued to ask that there needs to be more discussion, and I gather this will happen in the days to come. But there needs to be a greater discussion on economic recovery. How are we going to do? What are we going to do with regard to revenue generation? What are we going to do with the? Are we going to take the? What are we going to do with? What is the UNC, I should say, going to do with the word diversification?
Yeah.
The word diversification for the last 30 years has been an adjective, a very beautiful adjective that you put in a speech to make it sound good. We are at a time and a place, and we're backward actually. We are in a space and a time when the word diversification needs to be an action word. It needs to be more than just an adjective. And there has to be an aggressive, keyword, aggressive thrust towards diversification. That's one. How are we going to create, what are we going to, inflation is now 3.9%. And how are we going to, it's rising, gradually rising. And with the global economic catastrophe that is going on, the tariffs, the trade wars that are now going to emerge between Canada and America and Canada and Mexico and China and you name it. How are we going to meander that? How are we going to establish new trading partners? Are we going to establish new break ground in terms of who our key targets are? Are we going to continue dependent on the United States?
Let me ask specific questions for both parties. For the PNM, my thing is, have they done enough to convince us it's not more of the same? Would we be content with more of the same? It might technically be stable, but stable doesn't always mean a good thing, depending on the trajectory of where you're going, right? Because it seems as though we haven't gotten big promises on the economy from Stuart Young. It seems like they're still trying to work within the box they've built themselves.
Well, the truth is, my concern is this: you cannot expect to say that you are a new prime minister and this is a new chapter. That's his That is his slogan. We're going to the next chapter. My question is, well, what is the next chapter? Where are we going with regard to the next chapter? Because at the end of the day, we are in the middle of a trade war between the United States and Canada and Mexico and everybody else. You have not given us a manifesto. Note that the PNM has not released a manifesto, right? I'm trying to get my hands on the UNC manifesto that I saw they released last night. But the PNM has not put out a manifesto with regard to the plans that they have going forward in the 25 to 30 period. And it cannot be business as usual. And you use a very good word. Yes, things are stable. But let's be real. Things are not just stable. It's stagnant. And that stable, as you rightfully say, is not a very good word in economics, because we need to see a level of growth. And when we look around in the region, we are seeing growth taking place, economic growth taking place, even if it means that even if it includes an increase in tourism and the amount of cruise ships that are lining up in ports up the road, and then we don't have that level of,
Now,
that's
I
happening here.
I want to go to the UNC, because the flip side is, like we saw with the PSA President General, 10% is the starting point, and we're going to cut taxes, we're going to cut corporate tax, we're going to do away with property tax, and we don't like the debt. So in my mind, I'm like gearing up. Well, they're saying they didn't like the level of public debt, so they're going to not borrow as much. They're going to cut taxes, and with regards to labor prices, they're going to spend more. Where else are they going to spend more? So they're making these promises. It's not complete, the picture, but it seems as though they're saying we're going to spend more and earn less and borrow less, and somehow we're going to figure it out. And I don't know if I could, unless we get more details as to the how, if I could run with this. So with regards to the UNC, have they given us a good enough, based on what you know so far? You haven't seen the manifesto in its totality, I would imagine. But based on what we've seen so far, there's a lot of promises. I don't know. It's bigger promises than the PNM. It's more, it's things that the people want to hear. I'll give you that. But we don't have the details. And is it enough? And some people are even, because I think some economists are basically saying, whoa, how are these things going to happen? What do you mean? And they're trying to pump the brakes on it, not necessarily decrying the ideas, but I don't know if this is maybe too radical of a mindset shift that might be unrealistic.
Yeah, no, listen, I'll say this. Here's my main concern. I look at the slate of candidates, I look at the list, and I could nod my head and say, okay, this is good, this is good, this is okay, and I say I give it winnable, right? I don't see an economist here. I don't see someone who has economic gravitas on this list, right? And even if I could have seen one person who has economic gravitas on this list, I'd have been like, okay, there's somebody with a level of economic expertise to talk on macro and micro enterprises and how we do business. That's one. I disagree. Unless you go in there, when you get in there and you really do the accounts and you really see what is in the treasury, and if the auditor, because I mean, they will say, well, yeah, we know what is in the treasury because we see in the budget reports. Breads, let me tell you something. Reading and seeing is two different things.
Yeah.
And in this instance, throw caution to the wind for once and be a little bit more discreet. And I will say, when you walk in there and you really and truly see what is in reserve, what is in foreign, what is in HSF, what is in hand, then you can start talking about or having discussions about where we can start. But to stand up on our platform now and say 10%, well then, if that is where you're starting for 10% with regard to public servants, then I think we could agree that we should give Tobago the 7% that they want in budgetary allocation to do really and truly what they need, right? Because we have to look at it from that perspective. So I think in that, I don't agree with that. Then there's real property tax. I don't believe, and I stand firm in my belief, where there's nobody in this country that does not want to pay property tax. What I will say is that I don't agree with the annual rental value. I think that's nonsense.
Yeah.
For residential properties especially. That's absolute nonsense, right? wherever Collinwood found that, he need to go and put it back because it's a bad usage and a bad adoption of a policy.
I'll
Because
say
in
this.
Trinidad and
I don't know if it's
Tobago,
I don't know if it's
Huh?
the worst way. I don't know if it's the worst way, but the implementation of it has been left a lot to be desired of the valuations. That's all I'll say about that.
exactly. And then when you look at it from the perspective of, he was arguing the Barbados model. And I'm like, bro, you can't use the Barbados model because one, Airbnb is a big thing. Vacation rentals are a huge thing.
that's true.
It is a norm. It's part of their culture. It's part of their operations in Barbados because of their huge thrust towards this thing, tourism and economic growth. We don't have people in Trinidad that set up shop and and build a house with the intention to rent it out. That comes as an afterthought, right? So my thing is, the vast majority of Trinidad and Tobago does, but they build their house with the intention to have their house, the children, the grandchildren, blah, blah, blah. So one, we need to revisit the annual rental value aspect of it and just go with annual gross level, the annual gross worth of it, or whatever the valuation is for it as not as a rental, but as a ownership, selling value, I should say. That's one. Then there's the category where you have rental value, but even so, you take into consideration rental value, you take into consideration the overall cost of the commercial buildings, and then you tax them accordingly. I also think that one of these incentives that the UNC could have used is by lowering the tax for residential properties and and commercial properties, and it turns out to still generate revenue, but it also turns out to not put a burden on the pockets of the population. So I don't agree that property tax should be completely cut. That's one. Another one that I think is important. Do they have good programs with regard to GATE and education and pushing education? Yes. Do they have good policies with the ability to expand on it and go more in depth with it and go a step further with it in terms of the health policy? Yes, I agree. There needs to be a more, and I guess I don't 100% agree with. Here's my concern with giving guns to the population, right? we don't want a population to become trigger happy.
Yeah.
And my concern is you give a man, we are a country and a nation of habit. Let's be fair to ourselves. Let's be real. When you give us an inch, we just take a yard. When you take a yard, you just take a mile, right? I don't want to be jibbing or just chilling in a party and take a step back and step on somebody's white shoes, and next thing you know, I see a gun butt in my face, or a gun barrel in my face. So let us be careful. And there must be, I think, that there must be an overhauling of the entire process by which we acquire a fuel license. And I think one of the route to go is an actual board that is responsible for reviewing the application, doing the interview with the applicant, and then having it signed off by the Commissioner of Police, or whoever the case you want to put the remit under. If it's the Commissioner of Police, so be it. But the Commissioner of Police must sign it off as an ex officio member of the committee, not an actual member of the committee. And that would give us a level of fairness and a level of efficiency. If that could be done, then by all means. But, I still want to hear about agriculture.
Yeah.
I still want to hear about energy. I still want to hear about diversification, manufacturing, job creation, you name it.
The thing is, let's just close with crime here. And I agree with you. I think there was a study done. If you key up people to say that they're oppressed, they will see oppression even when there is none, because they essentially kind of tricked some people thinking that they had scars on their face. They took off the makeup secretly, put them out in a controlled environment, and then they just like, oh no, they were bad talking me from my scars. I was like, no, we took the makeup off. There were no scars on your face for you to be discriminated with. It's an interesting study, and I do think if you prime people up to say, defend yourself with a handgun, then all of a sudden every problem or security concern is going to be solved with a handgun, not with a judgment call, you know, maybe it was a little boy come to take his ball from my yard and you shooting face asking. Who knows what could happen, right? And of course, confrontations will you're right. I do think confrontations will all of a sudden start to be gun first, you know, who have the bigger gun, whatever. But more importantly, how practical is it? If criminals want to ambush you to kill you or rob you, they'll probably get a drop on you and you can't get your gun. We've even seen a police officer who tried to fight back when the criminal got the drop on them in that restaurant situation, and what happened there. It was a bad judgment call. But with that said, right now there was a report that says that at least some of the population has no confidence in either party with regards to crime. Does anybody, the short version, because we ran out of time, is there any hope with regards to any sort of innovation with regards to crime? I think, ironically, literally the only good news I have gotten with national security is just the appointment of Marvin Gonzalez, because I could at least have hope that he will put in work. But we don't necessarily have plans. We don't necessarily have anything that we could hang our hat on. Yes, he said some things, but not detailed enough to judge in any real way, right? We've seen more plans come out of the UNC and the NTA, and now they're fighting on who owns those plans, right? Is anybody kind of giving you real confidence that says this government in its totality is serious about crime?
Well, okay, the part where she wants to, where Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar wants to split national security to allow for the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Justice, I don't agree that the current government should have dismantled the Ministry of Justice, because the Ministry of Justice was doing human work. And I heard
with what
talk about Section 34 all over again. And Section 34, the premise on which they are putting emphasis on Section 34 is flawed. Sean, I will tell you, I have worked there. I saw the work that was done, the groundwork, the research that was done, and I can simply say that the same Administration of Justice Act that he's talking, bill that he's, the AJIPA that he's talking about now, that was formulated with immense research and grounding from different jurisdictions to come up with a plan that worked to be fair to everybody that is in the court system.
Well, okay, we run out of time, but what was the Ministries of Justice? What was the point of it? Because obviously
the Ministry of Justice was the motto of the Ministry of Justice was redefining the criminal justice system. It was aimed towards speeding up court matters. It was it was aimed towards everything that touched and concerned criminal justice, from workmen compensation, police complaints authority, legal aid, electronic monitoring, duty counsel, and the list, and prisons and trials and the cutting the cost in transportation for prisoners back and forth up and down the road and for just for adjournments and all that. It was a holistic approach to change the direction of the criminal justice system, to make it a fairer system, to make it more efficient system, to more timely system, to ease the burden of the amount of people that we have stuck up like stockpile in the prison, and to start towards taking people out of the system who had minor charges for like marijuana and whatnot, right? That's one.
Yeah.
The other part of it is we do need a Ministry of Home Affairs. We need greater coordination between immigration and Coast Guard and police. We need a Ministry of Defense that is going to see about everything else that does not need urgent attention.
This is the thing, and I'll just say this, thank you for educating me on the Ministry of Justice. I didn't really follow it when it existed. I'll just say this, Ministry of Defense on a practical level wouldn't matter.
No, it wouldn't. I agree with you 100%.
Right? So to me, Home Affairs would just be a rebrand. Now, if you want to say, I'm going to change how we coordinate with various things, then that's different. But I don't know if you need to rebrand like that, right?
Well,
maybe
I
you
think
do.
what she's trying to do is remove several layers that is preventing efficiency in the security services. So therefore, there are certain things like immigration, coordination between immigration. I mean, again, when it comes to security, there's a mini manifesto that is out that I want to see on security specifically. And there's one on health and there's one on education. So the three major ones that I want to see, right? But I'll say this. I understand where she's going with regard to when you devolve power, when you kind of remove the silos and you have more coordination, you're going to have a level of effectiveness. I just don't want it to turn out midterm. Let's just say they win. I don't, and midterm, I don't want them to become just another large cabinet that where you give somebody a work for giving somebody a work sake. That can't be. I'll also say this before we close.
Quick.
I hope they realize any administration that goes into office on the 29th of April need to understand one very important thing. This is a repeat of history. And the ministers of government that goes into office on the 29th or whenever they're sworn in need to understand one very important thing. We are in a cycle. 2025 is 1986. Economic challenges all over again. And they must be able to put their heads down, get off their high horses and the grandeur in office, and make sure they do the people's business. Because for the next 5 years, there is going to be a huge swing. And the swing is going to be absolutely not or definitely yes. It's one or the other. And it is going to depend on the kind of work and the kind of communication from government that comes out of why, what, how, when, and who. And if they could answer those questions the same way Mia Motley did it when she went into office and won handsomely, that's what is facing any administration that comes into office on the 29th of April.
Good point, but I want to just backtrack a little bit and say this. The silos that exist in the national security apparatus, I don't think a rebrand is going to matter. If you
I disagree with a rebrand. I totally
Which is what it is. The thing is, the real issue is you have to actually hold the various services accountable.
Agree.
Because the rivalry is there. They're already all under the Ministry of National Security umbrella, and there's rivalry there, and people don't want to work with people, and it's ridiculous. And I don't know what it is exactly why they're not being held accountable. I don't know if a new administration would be more successful in doing it. I haven't necessarily seen that to be true. I mean, putting a police officer in charge of essentially their version of national security might not make a difference on the matter because he's a former police officer and the other services are the other services. We have to wait and see on that, but we over time. They have 10 questions coming up next at 10 a.m. here on WSND Content Capital. So I want to thank Dr. Shane Alexander for joining me once again for the extended conversation. I know we didn't have any calls today. I apologize for that, like yesterday, but I didn't want to break the convo, and I wanted to try and get in as much as we can. Of course, we will continue the conversation as the elections comes down, and don't miss our coverage the Friday before. We'll have Dr. Mohammed, as well as on the night we will have a panel which will include some of our noted regulars and well-respected commentators here I'm talking about, amongst other people. So stay tuned for that. 10 questions. It's like Dr. Mohammed, thank you for joining me once again.
Yeah, my friend.
Folks, have a good day. Remember your allegiance to the Republic. Stay safe, and always remember it's nice to be nice. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private healthcare affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts,